I'm talking about vulnerability today, and I have to tell you, I liked exploring this topic since I've been dealing with it with vulnerability for years, if not decades. First as something I had no intention of ever allowing, not going to be vulnerable. And then later, begrudgingly getting on board step by step. And now I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm willing to be vulnerable, even when it doesn't come easily. So I'm still a work in progress. And from what Gail read, I love being reminded that the end game is that feeling of love and acceptance of myself. But initially, way back in the day, I thought vulnerability was extremely scary. Being vulnerable wasn't safe. And if I wanted to be safe, vulnerability was not an option. Early life circumstances ingrained in my psyche that walls were the way to go. Not that I knew I was putting up walls. That terminology happened through the self-help, feel-good psychology I explored as I was trying to find a way to be happy. And that was all helpful, but not strong enough for me to be willing to give up my walls, for me to be willing to be vulnerable. And those walls of self-protection, they did keep me safe. They were highly attuned to predators and unsafe situations and were barriers to being ridiculed or hurt. And through all these walls, instead of being vulnerable, I became a chameleon. I became whoever I needed to be in the situation so I could fit in. Or I blended into the background so I wouldn't be seen. And life is very small and relatively unfulfilling when you are in protection mode and unwilling to be seen. You can function, you can achieve things that society says are important, and you can look good to anyone on the outside looking in, but life is still small and unfulfilling. And I realized with these walls and fears, we can limit or miss what we are meant to contribute, be part of life. I can remember being at my mom's wedding. I had just graduated from high school, and as often happens, I didn't have the best relationship with my mom. I didn't think she listened to me, and well, whatever. But at this wedding, my stepfather had 5 kids, and there were 4 of us, and all of us were there for that wedding. And pictures were being taken, and I noticed none of the kids were in the pictures. But since my mom wasn't too happy with me since I skipped out earlier to see friends and was late for my job as the guest book monitor, I was afraid to say anything. I didn't want to see the mom look or tone. So I didn't say anything. And mom had this wonderful wedding, but when she got the pictures back, there wasn't one of the kids. And it upset her so much, she never put a wedding album together. And I really believe I was being prompted by spirit to ask about including the kids, but I let my ego fear get in the way. And when I look back now, I'm thinking, wow, it would really have been nice to have a picture of all the kids, but we've never been together before, and some of us have passed on. I know it's a small example, but I think it shows how we're all connected and needed in life experiences. We play our part, and we can't let fear or being vulnerable stop that. We need to show up. I can remember years ago when, in my mind, science of mind was not how it is now. What we believe has filtered into mainstream religion. And I remember being with my cousin, and I was afraid to share what I believed because she was very, very fundamentalist Christian. And I look back now and go, gosh, if I'd have been able to say what I believe, maybe I could have shifted consciousness in that moment. So I've spent a lot of time, living in the shadows, not speaking up, protecting myself from all kinds of fears and perceived consequences, and living that way, left a hole inside that just didn't get filled. And I think that had a big part in why I was always looking for my community. I wanted to belong, to be seen, and to be loved. I wanted that hole to fill up. What I didn't know was the walls were keeping me separate from the things I wanted most in life. Not allowing vulnerability was keeping me separate. And what I didn't know was the walls were not even needed to protect me, keep predators away, or keep me safe. I mean, these walls didn't stop me from getting hurt or feeling ridiculed, but they did keep me from what they kept me from were the people that would be there with me and for me when, bad things happened. What they kept me from was that deeper connection with spirit. I couldn't be vulnerable. I had to protect myself from all those perceived threats, and spirit couldn't get through, at least not in the magnitude that I am feeling now. I didn't have that openness. So, I got caught in the protective illusions of fear and ego and conditioning, and that blocked my full connection with spirit. But yes, spirit has always been a part of my life. But I was looking for that deeper connection. And with these walls, I was looking outside myself. And I didn't know that the walls were limiting my understanding and limiting what my life could be. I had these blinders. And I'm guessing most of us have had experiences where we spoke up or tried to help and got shut down or made to feel we were in the wrong. And because of my walls and experiences, I just pulled back and didn't do that again. I shrunk my participation in life and strengthened those walls. And I let hurt and anger run the show and cut people out of my life or stopped offering help or insights. All of that just making life pretty small. So when there are walls of fear and ego and protection, we miss out on life and we can lose sight of who we really are. There is what we present to the world, and then there is all the rest that we keep hidden from the world, and sometimes even hidden from ourselves. Our thoughts and actions can be confusing and contradictory. I mean, is it any wonder that our experience of life is all over the place? Especially when I think of what Ernest Holmes says. Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. If what we are thinking into it is confusing and contradictory, our life is going to mirror that confusion and craziness. And on top of that, how can the creative process of life, fulfill our desires when there is only confusion and contradiction running around in our head and our thoughts? How can life reflect back to us wholeness when what we project into life is fragmented, changing from one experience to the next? To have the life we want, to have the mirror reflect back to us a life we want to live and enjoy, we have to let go of all the fears, the walls, the contradictions, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable and be our authentic true selves. When we can be authentic consistently, our thoughts are more consistent and we see more of the life we want to live. We support the creative process instead of sending it off in all these different directions. Spirit always says yes. But if we keep changing our minds or putting up roadblocks, then Spirit never gets to fully give us what we really want and what we need. It reminded me of all the different projects that I've had throughout my life and how many of them were never completed. It's like jumping around. And I started thinking, gosh, if I were Spirit, I would be pretty frustrated with all the changes and directions and incomplete projects that happen from having a fragmented consciousness. I like giving Spirit human emotions and ideas. It just helps me connect better. So I believe part of our spiritual journey is to let go of all those human fears and walls and barriers that we've created and uncover who we are as expressions of God. Allow ourselves to be authentic and show up as the unique expression of God we are. The strong, brave, caring, loving individuals we're meant to be. Giving ourselves the grace of vulnerability, trusting that we are supported on this journey, allows us to be authentic. Being vulnerable is the gateway to our authentic self. Being vulnerable is the willingness to be seen without our defenses, to let the walls down and come out of the shadows. It's the willingness to release control and bogus self-images, to let go of the chameleon and the masks that we've created. It's the willingness to trust the creative process of mind, the creative process of life, to trust that there is something bigger than us that's got this and is there for us. When we are vulnerable and we let any walls come down and stop resisting life, when we do that, we become open and can allow our authentic self to show up. Vulnerability is that path to authenticity, to being who we are without the stories we've created along the way. And I was thinking, everyone talks about living with authenticity, about being authentic, but I don't often hear it defined. And I just go by a vague idea that it means being honest. And part of it is that, but the authenticity I'm talking about here is really being in spiritual alignment, where we express our thoughts, feelings, and values honestly. We live from our inner spiritual knowing. We act in alignment with our deeper self. We let that wonderful being that lives inside of us, that is God, express. Authenticity is not something we achieve, it is something we allow. It is remembering we are already one with spirit and then living from that deeper truth. It is living our divine essence and letting our unique expression of God be seen and heard. And it's a gift we give the world. Our authenticity is a gift we give the world. This quote from actress and writer Julianne Connor, I think, expresses the basis of this gift. When you let me see you, you give me permission to be seen. When you let me see you, you give me permission to be seen. I know that when I'm with someone who expresses their authentic self, I feel more confident in expressing from my authentic self. And neither of us judges or second guesses. We connect and explore and grow in our conversations and in our relationship. We appreciate our uniqueness from a place of sameness. Nothing about us could be the same. We can be different in all aspects, gender, race, age, country of origin, life issues, whatever. And we will still recognize each other in our sameness, in our authenticity, as an expression of the divine. When I allow myself to be authentic, I get to connect at a heart level, at that God level, and that feels really good. And I open the door for others to be authentic and connect at a heart level. It's where life expands. It's where we want to live. So we need to embrace and practice vulnerability, no matter how scary it feels. Because vulnerability removes the illusion. It dissolves those fear-based identities and ways of being that keep us separate. It opens that door to our authenticity. And authenticity reveals truth and allows us to express our true nature, who we really are at our core, our God essence. Together, vulnerability and authenticity, they bring us into alignment. They align us with the creative power of mind, allowing God to express more fully through and as us. And our experience begin to reflect who we are and how we want to be. Our lives get better. We step into that space of who we are. I'm not saying be vulnerable and poof, you will be authentic and all the power of mind will be at your fingertips. Yes, I know that's possible, but if you're like me, it takes a little longer. And it's going to take commitment and courage. I don't have that instantaneous consciousness yet, but I'm working on it. And even though I know being vulnerable and authentic will lead to connection, love, belonging, peace, that moreness, that awareness of that magnificence of God and how much more I can be as an expression of God, my ego still says vulnerability is weakness way too often. Fear can pop up when I'm thinking about letting my protective walls down. And being authentic can still feel risky because it challenges who I think I am. I can get lost in the fear of losing who I am and not knowing who I am. So it's a process. It's that courage to step in and do it anyways. And I know I have a lot of dirt to dig through to get to that treasure. and life still happens. So I may throw a few more shovels of dirt on the pile from time to time, but I want that treasure. So I continue to practice. I continue to be vulnerable, let who I am out as often as I can. Because I know I have to have courage and be committed to letting go of my human fear so I can get that treasure and fully align with my spiritual truth. I have to trust the process and be committed to shifting my thoughts every time the old ideas and patterns come up. I need to continually see what is not me and consciously choose the me I am meant to be. Sometimes it takes more time than I want it to, especially when I'm working through old hurts and forgiveness and really stepping out there. But that's all part of the practice of vulnerability, letting go of the lies and finding the truth. It's not all hard work. It's not all hard work. We practice vulnerability every time we tell the truth instead of creating a story. We practice vulnerability every time we show up instead of leaving or hiding in the background. We practice vulnerability every time we let ourselves be seen as we are instead of managing the picture and hiding behind the mask. Every time we do this, we interrupt the pattern. We interrupt that pattern. And in doing these simple practices, we also affirm something different, something deeper. We affirm that we are safe in being real. We affirm that life supports our authenticity. We affirm that the divine expresses more fully through our openness. And in that, something new begins to emerge. Not a better version of the mask that I have or you have created throughout life, but that new me, that new you, the real us. That's what begins to emerge. So what do some of these practices look like in real life? It's not dramatic. It's subtle in subtle changes in how you respond to life. It can be as simple as admitting you don't have it all together. You don't know everything. Just saying, I don't know. Or telling someone how you actually feel. Not snarky, but from a place of love. Telling the truth when it would be easier to keep your mouth shut. Letting someone see your heart without knowing how they will respond or react. And that's courage. Or taking a step without certainty, not knowing how it's going to work out, just stepping out in faith. I'm a planner, so that's one of my more challenging vulnerabilities. I want to know the end game. Sometimes we just don't, and we've got to take that step anyways. Now, these acts, they might seem small, but they're profound. They're sacred because we aren't hiding from life. We are participating in it. And each one shifts our consciousness. And as our consciousness shifts, our experience begins to shift with it. We aren't forcing anything. We aren't making a choice and aligning with truth by willpower. Through these simple actions, we're changing our inner world and how we respond to our outer world, creating a better outer world that reflects this new inner world. It's kind of this wonder self-fulfilling circle. You know, as we say, as within, so without. And the without, the outside impacts the inside. So we want to continue that cycle, creating that life we want. But remember, vulnerability is the first step that takes us from weakness to power. Vulnerability allows us to be seen Authenticity allows us to be real, and alignment comes from vulnerability and authenticity and allows life to respond and create. It allows life to be there fully for us. I'd like to close with this metaphor from Reverend Scott Aubrey's Spiritual Passages. No bird can fly without opening its wings, and no one can love without exposing their heart. No bird can fly without opening its wings, and no one can love without exposing their heart. So I invite you to be vulnerable, to be seen, to expose your heart, and allow your authentic self to lead the way, and just see where it takes you. Just let it out. Be strong and let that inner knowing just be and see where it takes you. Thank you.